Good morning, friends. Welcome to the second lecture of Polity Static course. And in this lecture, we'll be covering 6-7 chapters of Lakshmikant. And like the earlier lectures, I will be telling you what to read, what to miss, and what to read. I mean, which are the most important parts which cannot be missed at any cost. So we'll start with the chapter Union and its territories. So this is a small chapter and there are some important things which you need to remember in this chapter. So this chapter contains the Article 1, it contains Article 1 to Article 4, which are the starting chapters of our Constitution. So we'll start with Article 1. So Article 1 tells that India is a union of states. It's a union of states, it's not a federation of states. And why? We have already discussed that in the earlier lecture. So it says that India is a union of states. One very important thing you have to remember is that it contains the definition of territory of India. And territory of India contains three things. Firstly, it contains the states. It contains the union territory. And it contains the future states which will be acquired by India. Right? So the word territory of India is greater, or its scope is wider than the word Union of India, because Union of India only contains the states of India, right? It only contains the states, while the territory of India contains state, UT and the future states which will be acquired by India. Let's move to Article 2 now. So Article 2 deals with, or it empowers the Parliament to admit into Union of India or establish new states on such terms and conditions as it thinks. So it empowers the Parliament to admit new states. What do we mean by new states? So new states are basically those states which were not part of India, but they became part of India after it is acquired by India. So the example of it could be Sikkim, right? And in this article there are two things which you have to remember. First, there could be a state which is already a state, right, and it was independent of India, and when it was acquired by India, it became the new state of India. The example is Sikkim, right? Second example could be of Goa. Goa was not a state when it was acquired by India, but later it became state of India, right? It became a new state for India. So it could be a state which is existing, but which then became part of India, or it could be a land which was not a state, and so when it was acquired by India, and later it became state of India, like Goa. Let's start with Article 3. So Article 3 relates to formation or changing of the existing states of Union of India. So what is the difference between Article 2 and 3? Article 2 talks of new states which were never part of India, which newly inducted into the Indian Union, right? While Article 3 talks of the states which are already there, and those states are divided or their areas increased. And in this case, we can take the example of Chhattisgarh. We can take the example of Jharkhand. We can take example of Gujarat. We can take example of Karnataka. All these states were already inside the India. They were inside the Indian Union, and later it was. I mean, the parliament has changed, or they have kind of combined many territories into one state, or they have divided one large part of territory into small states, like we did it with Madras, we did it with the Bombay state. So this is the main difference between Article 2 and 3. Article 2 talks of areas which are never part of India, which became part of India, like Sikkim, Goa. 3 talks of Parliament forming a new states from the existing states of India. Right? Here is the key difference between 2 and 3. So let's look into the procedure of the creating state under Article 3. So as you know that it is very simple. The Prime Minister has to, I mean, a bill has to be passed in the Parliament, but with the prior recommendation of the President. And the President, what does he do first? He sends the bill to the State Assembly for their consideration or for their advice, right? But their advice is not mandatory on the Parliament or on the President. It's just an advice. It's not mandatory. The Parliament can accept or reject their advice. So you must have been remembering a few years back when Mayawati was in power in UP, he recommended the Parliament that UP should be divided into 4 regions or 4 states. But it was not accepted, not even given consideration by the Parliament. So the law says that you have to, I mean, it's mandatory for the President to send that bill to the State Assembly, the concerned State Assembly, from where the new state will be created for their consideration, right? But one trivia here is that if it's a union territory, then the President is not bound to send the bill to that assembly. So if the Parliament wants to create a new state in Delhi, the Delhi Assembly, under no law or under no part of constitution, it is mandatory that a President will send a bill to the Assembly of Delhi for their consideration or for their advice. Right? So it's a little but important difference which you need to remember. So one thing which is very, again, a very important statement of this chapter is that union government can destroy states in India, but states cannot destroy union in India. Like unlike in US, the central government cannot create a new state. It's beyond their power. But in India, it's an indestructible union of destructible states. That is the word saying that union cannot be destroyed. No state cannot be seceded, but yes, the states in India could be subdivided into small states with just simple majority, right? Now let's deal with Article 4. Article 4 says that laws made under Article 2 and 3 are not to be considered under Article 368. So any law which is passed under Article 2 and 3 regarding formation of state, it will not be considered as a constitutional amendment under Article 368, which means that they could be passed by simple majority itself. So one more thing which you should remember in this chapter is that remember the states, how they are created. Like Andhra Pradesh was the first state which was created. Just remember, the UPSC could ask the kind of chronology that which states were formed earlier, matched like this, which states were formed earlier or arranged in ascending or descending order. That could be a question could be asked on that. That is given in the Lakshrikant. You need to read that. Rest I have all covered in this chapter. You don't need to study anything further. There is this Dhar Commission and Fazal Ali Commission which is there, but this is more important for your mains exam, not important for your prelims exam, because never UPSC has asked about Dhar Commission or Fazal Commission in the prelims exam. So you can skip that part at least for the prelims exam. Let's move to the next chapter. The next chapter is Preamble of the Constitution. This again is a small chapter, and many people kind of skip it. They feel it is very easy and simple. But mind it, UPSC has been asking a lot on preamble from last few years. Last year they asked a question on preamble. 2-3 years back they asked a very simple question on preamble. So in last 3 years, twice they have asked a question on preamble. So your first job should be to read each and every line of that. It's not a very big. It's just a few, probably 9-10 lines, right? But read that 9-10 lines very carefully, because a question could be asked from any of the word or any of the line. They could even ask the meaning. So you have to remember that. So the preamble, it contains the summary of the Constitution, and it contains the summary of the Constitution, and it is created after the Constitution is formed. So it reflects the mindset, the working, how the minds of the constitution makers worked, right? So that is why it was written after the constitution is made, so that it could reflect in dicto what the constitution stands for. So what are the ingredients of the preamble? So two things you have to remember. One, the source of authority. So the Constitution derives its authority from the people of India. And secondly, what the preamble gives the nature of Indian state. So nature of Indian state, according to the preamble, is that India is a sovereign, socialist, secular, and a democratic republic. Right? This is what the nature of Indian state according to the Constitution. One thing you need to remember is that the three words socialist, secularist, and integrity are added by the 42nd Amendment 1976. So they were not original part of the Constitution. And UPSC has actually asked a question on it once. So you have to remember that these three words were not the part of original preamble, and that thing you have to remember in everything. Even in the DPSP, you have to remember which are the new ones, because a question could be asked on that line. My idea is not to teach you Lakshmikant in toto. My idea is to make sure that you if a question, because 99% question of polity is asked from Lakshmikant, my idea is that you will be able to solve that question, right? So I will work in that direction. So nature of Indian state is sovereign, socialist, secularist, and democratic republic. So let's now briefly examine the key words mentioned in the preamble. So first word they have mentioned is sovereign. Sovereign means that there is no authority above it. You are completely independent in your own affairs. You have no one to say. I'll give you an example. Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, they were independent, but they were not sovereign. Because till 1980s, at least in Canada, the head of the state was the queen, and they were a dominion republic. So they were not sovereign because they were answerable to the higher authority, which was the Queen of Britain. But in India's case, even though we are part of Commonwealth, but that's an organization where everybody is equal. We are not under anybody's authority. We have the power to decide friendship, to decide war with any of the people, right? Second is socialist, which is self-explanatory. I will not explain it because socialist is, it could be many different kind of socialist. It could be, and that is actually a vague word because socialist, as you say, we are socialist. Well, there are 100 types of socialism. There is favorable socialism, there is syndicate socialism, there is Darwinism, there is Marxist socialism, there is Gandhian socialism, there is Nehruvian socialism. So it's a vague word and it could be interpreted as you want. Third is secular, which again is a self-explanatory word, that a state where you don't have any official religion, that is a secular country. Fourth is democratic. This again is self-explanatory. Fifth is republic. Now, India is a democratic republic, but Britain is not a democratic republic. Why? Because in Britain, the head of the state is not elected. It is hereditary. It is monarchical system. While in India, the head of the state, which is the president, is elected. Even though the election is indirect, but still it is elected, right? So a country where the head of the state is elected can be called as a republic, and we are a republic. Next is justice. Now, justice, what the preamble mentioned, is social, economic, and political. What do we mean by social justice? It means that nobody will be discriminated on the basis of caste, class, religion. Economic justice means that there will be no concentration of wealth in few hands. The resources are equitably distributed. And political justice means that each and every person has the right to vote, and it is equal for everyone. It's not like that X vote means that it has a value of 5 or my vote has a value of 1. It's one vote for everyone, right? Next is equality. So this could again be divided civil, political, and economic. So provisions related to civic equality are there between Article 14 to Article 18. With respect to political equality, it's Article 325 and 326, the right to vote and everything. And related to economic equality is Article 36, Article 39, which talks about secures equal right for man and woman. Next is fraternity. So if you would have been aware with the French Revolution, there are 3 words: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Fraternity means brotherhood among the people. So the preamble says that though we speak different language, we have different religion, different culture, but all India who are living within the territory of India, they are brothers. They share a feeling of fraternity, and they are all Indian, right? Next is significance of the preamble. So significance is that it could be called as the soul of constitution. It contains the grand and noble vision of a constituent assembly. Next, we come to another important part of this chapter, which is preamble a part of our constitution? So there are 2 cases which which says whether or where the court decided that whether preamble is a part of constitution or not. One is the Berubali case, and in that case the Supreme Court observed that preamble is key to the minds of the makers of constitution, right? It is key to the mind of the makers of constitution, but it said that it is not the part of constitution, even though it's a very important document, but it is not the part of constitution. Therefore, the idea was that the government wanted to amend preamble, so it said that since it's not a part of constitution, it cannot be amended, right? Next case where the issue of preamble came up was the Keshwanand Bharti case, the very famous Keshwanand Bharti case. So in this Keshwanand Bharti case, it declared that preamble is part of constitution and therefore it can be amended. That is why you have this 42nd amendment where the words social, secular, integrity was introduced. If in 60 the court would have decided this word could have been introduced earlier. So it said that the preamble is very much the part of constitution and it is it could be amended. So one more facts about preamble is that preamble is non-justifiable, just like just like directive principles. You cannot go to court and say that in preamble is written equality and Ambani is so rich and I'm so poor. You cannot go to court to say that. And secondly, it is neither a source of power to the legislature nor a prohibition about the power of legislature. So this ends the second chapter, or this ends the another chapter of Lakshmikant, which is preamble. Let's move to the third chapter, which is directive principles of state policy. Well, I will cover fundamental rights in the next lecture, and that I will cover in very detail, because that is two chapters, fundamental rights and parliament. I would cover in detail because a lot of questions have been asked from this chapter and I want that I should not miss anything. So directive principles of state policy. Again, one of the favorite topics or one of the favorite chapters of UPSC. Every year, I don't think there will be one year you can show me that a question has not been asked from DPSP. So these chapters where the question has been asked, UPSC has been asked, I think you should focus more on this chapter and you should read it twice and thrice. So first of all, what are the features of directive principles? So first is that it seeks to create welfare state. Now these things you should remember because UPSC asks these things, that directive principles in India stands for, or it wants to create, it wants to kind of establish. So there would be 3-4 statements. So you have to be well versed that what does directive principles exactly wants. Because the 4 statements could be very similar to each other. But UPSC is asking because it wants to ensure that whether you have read this chapter carefully or not. So first we can is that it seeks to create a welfare state. Secondly, it is fundamental in the governance of the country. Article 37 says that. And thirdly, it is non-justifiable. Let's move to the classification of directive principles. So Constitution does not contain any, Constitution does not provide any constitution, or it does not provide any classification of DP. So if a statement is made in the paper that Constitution divides directive principles into Kantian principles, socialist principles, or liberal principles, then you should mark it wrong, because Constitution never says or it never classifies any directive principles into subcategories. It is the Lakshmi Kant which is, or it is not Lakshmi Kant, it is actually these jurists which have divided these directive principles into socialist, Gandhian, and liberal principles, right? So, what do you need to study in this chapter? Where do you need to focus more in this chapter? So, first thing where you should focus more is that you should understand which directive principles are under which category. Because I guess if 12 UPSC has asked a question in which it said that which of the following directive principles come under the Gandhian category or the Gandhian principles. So you should be well versed. It's given Lakshmi Kant. You should be well versed with which directive principles comes under which category. Next we'll do is that we'll explain the newly added directive principles, because this is again an area which UPSC has asked in earlier years and very important for your exam. So there are 4 or 5 newly added directive principles. These include, I'll mention them. First is to promote equal justice and to provide free legal aid to the poor. This is a very important, or this comes under Article 39A. Next is to take steps to secure participation of workers in the management of industries. Third newly added principle is to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard forest and wildlife. Fourth newly added principle is that the state it directs the state to minimize inequalities in income, status, and facilities. These all were added during the 42nd Amendment, when Indira Gandhi was trying to make India more, or shift India towards more left. So these are mostly socialist principles. And lastly, to secure opportunities for healthy development of children. One more, or the most recent directive principle which is added, is the thing that it's Article 43B, which says that to promote voluntary formation, autonomous functioning, democratic control, and professional management of cooperative societies. This is the most recent directive principles to be added. So if a question comes, then which is the most recent directive principles to be added, it is this, which is professional management of cooperative societies. That's Article 43B. Right? Rest of the directive principles category wise is given in Lakshmikant. It's very factual, therefore I will not take that. I'll deal with the next important part of this chapter, which is conflict between the fundamental rights and directive principles. So this is a very important part of the chapter, which is conflict between fundamental rights and directive principles. And you need to remember what is the current stand of Supreme Court on directive principle, or whether directive principle is more supreme over fundamental rights, fundamental rights are more supreme over directive principles. So the first hearing, the first case where it heard regarding this dispute is the Golaknath case. And in that case, the court clearly said that Parliament cannot take away or abridge any of the fundamental rights. Right? Parliament cannot take away any of FR. Next case where the Supreme Court decided on fundamental right and directive, which is more important, is after this judgment, what happened was that the Parliament reacted to the SC judgment by enacting 24th and 25th Amendment. Right? And what does this amendment say? So, 24th Amendment said that Parliament has power to abridge or take away any of the fundamental rights by enacting a constitutional amendment. That is what Article 24 says. And Article 25 said that, or it inserted two articles, 31C, which had two provisions. 31C is the most disputed or most controversial article inserted by the Indira Gandhi government, and it had two provisions. First was that no law seek to implement the socialist directive principles specified in Article 39B and C, which is equitable distribution of the material resources, shall be void on the ground that it violates the fundamental right. So clearly, if we see or easily understand, it said that no law which is passed by the Parliament to implement the socialist principles mentioned in Article 39A and B. What does Article 39A or B says? It says that there should be equitable distribution of material resources. So it said that any law which is to implement this provision of the principles will not be void on the grounds that it violates the fundamental right. It violates Article 14 or Article 19 or Article 31, which is right to property. No, so, right? This was the first provision of this Article 31C. The second provision is that it somehow abolished judicial review. In this matter. So it said that no law containing a declaration for giving effect to such policy shall be questioned in any court in India. Right? So first part is that no policy, no law which will implement Article 39A and B, which is a socialist principle, will be declared void on the ground that it is violating fundamental right. And second provision of Article 31C was that after the law is passed, no court has the jurisdiction to have a judicial review on that. Right? This is final. This is final. No court in India can kind of stop that law. So the Keshwaran Bharti, after this law was passed, this amendment was passed, somebody appealed it in the court, and under the Keshwaran Bharti case, under the Keshwanand Bharti case, the court said that the first provision of Article 31C, which is that Parliament will pass a law and nobody, it said it is valid, but the second provision, which ended the judicial review provision, it declared it invalid or unconstitutional, because it gave the verdict of basic structure, right? Therefore, it said the judicial review is a part of basic structure, and then Article 31C provision B violates that, because it takes away the right of court to have judicial review. So it kind of struck down the second provision of the Article 31C. Now again, the government again responded to it with the 42nd Amendment. And also, Keshwanand Bharti case said that directive principles have a more higher role, or it will be given preference over fundamental right. It has not said it explicitly, but by allowing the first provision of 31C, it implicitly meant that the Supreme Court has said that directive principle has a higher status than the fundamental right. So under the 42nd Amendment, what government did was that government extended the scope of the first provision of Article 31C to implement all the directive principles. So the Article 31C till now it would have been only used for implementing Article 39A and B, right? This minimizing the inequality. Under the 42nd Amendment, the government extended the scope of the first provision of Article 31C to see that all the directive principles come under this category. Which means that if the government tries to implement any of the directive principles, that will not be questioned, that will not be considered void, even if it violates any of the fundamental rights, right? So now this would have been draconian, because there have been so many directive principles, and if on the sake of implementing DPSP, the state could have taken all the fundamental rights from us, right? So naturally, Supreme Court intervened, and under Minerva Mill case, it struck down, or it declared the 42nd Amendment, or this provision of 42nd Amendment, as unconstitutional. And that ended all the debate between DPSP and fundamental rights. The Minerva Mill case observed that Indian Constitution is founded on the bedrock of the balance between fundamental rights and DPSP, and therefore nobody could be given preference over the fundamental rights, right? And it said that harmony and the balance between the fundamental rights and DPSP is part of basic structure. You cannot give preference to one over another. You cannot say that, okay, for implementing DPSP, I can end some of the fundamental, or I can violate some of the fundamental rights. This is not how the constitution makers wanted, right? So it ended all the debate, and it said that there should be harmony maintained between DPSP and the fundamental rights. And therefore, at present, fundamental rights enjoy supremacy over DPSP. Next, we come to another part of the chapter, which is directives which are outside the part 4. The part 4 is which contains the DPSP. So there are 3 directives outside part 4, and these 3 include the claims of SC/ST to services, Second is instruction in the mother tongue. And third is the development of Hindi language. So these are also directives given to the government, but they are outside the DPSP, and you need to remember that if a question comes, the development of Hindi language is part of DPSP, then you have to mark it wrong. And the last thing which we discuss in this chapter is fundamental rights, comparison between fundamental rights and DPSP. So fundamental rights are negative in nature because they prohibit the state from doing certain things, right? Prohibits from discriminating on the basis of caste and caste. So it's negative in nature. While DPSP they are positive in nature. Secondly, they are justiciable or they are justifiable. They are not justifiable. Thirdly, they want to promote what this is again a question once asked in UPSC. As fundamental rights promotes political democracy. While DPSP, they promote social and economic democracy. Next is fundamental rights are individualistic, it deals with individuals. While DPSP is for community, it's community oriented, right? It talks about minimizing the inequality in society, equal pay between men and women, talks of community things. And last is that it does not require any legislative or it does not require any legislation for its implementation. While this requires legislation for implementation. Right? So this contains all the important part of this chapter. Your job will be to read all the DPSPs and try to ensure that you know that which DPSP is under which part, whether it's in the socialist part or in the Gandhian part, liberal part. This is the most important thing in the chapter. And secondly, to understand how the DPSP is different from fundamental rights and the philosophy of DPSP. Rest I have already kind of covered in this chapter, and this ends this chapter. Let's move to the next chapter, which is fundamental duties. Now, fundamental duties also UPSC has asked a question 2 years back. Not as important as DPSP, but yes, could be an important chapter. So, first of all, we start with the trivia, which is that the mention or there is no mention of the word fundamental duties in the original constitution. Right? It was introduced after the Swan Singh Committee's recommendation. So if a question says that they were part of the constitution since its inception, then that you have to mark it wrong because it was introduced 30 years after the independence of India. It was added in 1976, right? And one more thing in which the question could be asked is that all the fundamental rights were introduced in 1976, or all the fundamental duties was introduced in 1976. This again is wrong because one fundamental duty is added in 2002. And this duty is, or this fundamental right duty which is incorporated, is that it provide education to child between age 6 to 14 years. That every parent should provide education to their children between age to 6 to 14 years. And this was brought because this education, right to education act was being introduced, which was making education compulsory. Therefore, this duty was included in 2002. So, therefore, all the duties were not added in 76. One duty was also added in 2002. Remember this fact. One more important trivia about this is that it is inspired from USSR. It's inspired from USSR, right? Also, remember all the fundamental duties by heart. I mean, you have to remember which duty says that, which duty. Because in 14 they asked a question regarding fundamental duties. Even last year also they asked one question on fundamental duties. Therefore, you have to remember all the fundamental duties by heart. There could be no shortcut in that. I cannot teach you a way to learn that. That's pure mugging. You have to mug that. Next is, which is important, is that it is only confined to citizens. See, my idea here is to give you maximum input in minimum time. If I will start discussing all the fundamental duties, that will be of no use to you and me. That will waste your time, that will waste my time, and that will reduce my energy or my scope for dealing with things or facts or issues which are more important to you. Right? So these factual things, DPSP, the name of DPSP or the name of fundamental duties, it's there in Lakshmikant, you should read that. I will only try to focus on things on which a question could be asked in the exam, things which you can miss while reading the chapter. So it is only confined to citizens. It is not for the aliens. Aliens do not have any fundamental duties. It's only for the citizens. Next important is that they are not justifiable, right? They are not justifiable on their own. But yes, Parliament can pass, or Parliament is free to enforce them by passing a suitable legislation. So by passing a legislation, Parliament can enforce this fundamental. So it has done that, and a question was also asked last year regarding that. So it has passed number of acts like Prevention of Insult to National Honors Act 1971, Protection of Civil Right Act 1955, Wildlife Protection Act 1972, and Forest Conservation Act 1980. All these acts tried to enforce the fundamental duty. One more trivia which I need to bring it here to end the chapter is that the fundamental duties talks of respecting national anthem and national flag. It does not talk about respecting the national song. So if a question is asked that it's a fundamental duty to sing the national song, then mark it wrong because it's not. Only national flag and national anthem you have to respect, that's given in the fundamental duties. So this ends this chapter. We'll move to the next chapter. Which is the amendment of the Constitution. So, according to the Supreme Court, Parliament can amend all the part of constitution except the basic structure, which cannot be touched. Basic structure should remain. So there are three types of amendment in India. We'll discuss that. First type of amendment is amendment by simple majority of parliament. Now this amendment requires just simple majority, which means that 50% of the people, and it also means that suppose there are just 300 people who are there, which means if 151 members support the bill will be passed. So there is no criteria that it should also have majority of the parliament, which means that at least 276 people should agree for it. No, it is based on this present and voting. How many of them are present, and majority of them should vote in favor of the bill. The bill will be passed. So there are 18 areas where simple majority is, where the amendment could be done by simple majority, and it's given in Lakshmikant all the 18 areas. I will not waste my time for factual things, as I have told earlier. But one thing which is important is that this amendment by simple majority is outside the scope of Article 368, right? So when you do amendment through this method, it is outside the scope of Article 368. Next is special majority of parliament. Now, special majority of parliament means that 50% of the total membership, 50% of the total membership, first criteria is that. And second is that 2/3 present and voting. These are the two main criteria for the special majority. So 50% of total membership would include all the vacant posts and all the posts which are not filled. So the total strength of parliament is 550. So suppose there are 550 members, at least 276 members should have voted for it. And they should, and the second provision is that 2/3 present and voting. So let me give an example. Suppose there are 400 people, right? And what is 2/3 of 400 people? Suppose it's 260, right? The bill will not be passed because this 260 is less than this number 276, which is required for this bill to be passed, or for this amendment to be passed. So first of all, it should be 50% of total membership, and secondly 2/3 present and voting. These are the two criteria on the basis of which, in this method, the bill is amended. So this is used for fundamental rights and directive principles. For amending any fundamental rights, or incorporating or amending any directive principles, this method is used. Third is special majority of parliament and consent of the state. So in this case, the first thing is, the second thing, that the parliament has to pass by 2/3 present in voting plus 50% of the majority of the seats. And secondly, half of the state should also ratify that bill by simple majority. So first is that the Parliament has to pass by 2/3 present in voting and 50% of the seats, or the 50% of the strength of the house. And the state assembly, in that the criteria is that at least half of the state should ratify it. So if there are 28 states in India, 15 states or 40 or more than 14 states should ratify it. And second is they should ratify it by simple majority. So this thing you have to remember that the parliament has to pass by 2/3 majority, but states have to only ratify the bill by using simple majority, not by using the special majority. So one trivia here is that there is no time limit within which the state should give consent to the bill. There is no time limit. They can stuck the bill could remain with the state for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. It's not mandated that you have to return the bill or you have to decide on the bill within the particular time period, right? However, there is one more thing, that if 15 people or the 15 states ratify, then automatically the bill is passed. So even if some states kind of stuck it and say that we will not decide on the bill, at a moment where the majority of states give or the majority of states ratified the bill is deemed to be passed. So there are 7 areas where this is introduced, and actually this is used only for federal provisions. If the federal provisions are touched, regarding that this is passed. Kind of example, GST. Example, if you curb the power of judiciary, if you increase or decrease the power of President of India, Vice President of India. So all these federal institutions, if you try to change or amend their powers, then you have to pass it using the third criteria, which is special majority and the consent of the state provision. Because it's very natural. I mean, you have to think logically also. You are involving states, it means that it will only deal with federal provisions. So even if you have not marked up the areas where this is used, you can still solve it using your logic. If you see that this is a federal provision, this deals with federal provision, then yeah, definitely it will be part 3, right? Or it will be amended using the third method. So this ends, one more or 2 more trivia which I want to end this chapter with is that state assembly cannot initiate amendment. They cannot even. In US they can do, but in India it is only the parliament which can initiate the constitutional amendment. And second, there is no provision of joint sitting in case of constitutional amendment. In case of ordinary bill, yes, there is the provision of joint sitting, but in case of constitutional amendment, there is no provision of joint sitting. Let's move to the next chapter, which is basic structure of the Constitution. So, basic structure of the Constitution, there are 4 main judgments regarding this. We will deal with all of them to understand what do we mean by basic structure. So, before that, we should understand what does Article 13 contain. So, Article 13 says that state shall not make any law which takes away fundamental rights given by Part 3, right? And the law includes not only ordinary laws, but ordinances, bylaws, rules, sub-rules. So the word law it's very wide in scope. right? But it is silent on constitutional amendment, right? So Article 13 says that state shall not make any law which abridges the fundamental rights. Now the whole dispute regarding basic structure is because of this Article 13. So the first main judgment regarding fundamental rights or the sanctity of the fundamental rights was the Shankari Prasad judgment in 1951. So Shankari Prasad judgment said that government can amend any part of the constitution, including the fundamental right. Right? And it said that Article 13 or the word law in Article 13 means only the ordinary law. It does not mean the constitutional amendment law. Right? The scope of Article 13 is only on ordinary laws. Through constitutional amendment, the parliament can change any part of the constitution. So, next Supreme Court judgment will dealt with the constitutional amendment power of the parliament is the Polity judgment, which we have dealt earlier. So it reversed the Shankari Prasad judgment and said that fundamental rights are immutable. They cannot be by any kind of constitutional amendment. They cannot be scrapped or amended, right? And it said that the word law in Article 13 also means constitutional amendment. Right? This is what this is. The word law in Article 13 also means constitutional amendment. So, what was the government reaction? We have done earlier that government enacted the 24th Amendment, and this Act amended Article 13 and 368 and declared that Parliament has power to abridge or take away any fundamental right under Article 368, and such Act will not be a law under Article 13. Later on, Keshwar and Bharti case, it overruled the Golak judgment and declared that 24th Amendment is valid, but it brought the concept of basic structure. So the Keshwar and Bharti case said, in Keshwar and Bharti case, the Supreme Court said that Parliament is free to amend any part of the Constitution, including the fundamental right, but they cannot violate the basic structure, they cannot change the basic structure of the Constitution. And what does we mean by basic, and what does basic structure contain? Well, secularism, federalism, right to, its number has been increasing. There are like 15, 16 areas which comes as a part of basic structure of Constitution, and therefore, if the Parliament passes any law which violates any basic structure of Constitution, then that law could be considered as unconstitutional, or that could be declared unconstitutional by the court. So in 1993, when the central government dissolved all the assemblies, the UP assembly, the MP, the UP government, MP government, and Supreme Court said that yes, secularism is part of basic structure. These government violated the basic structure by by not following secularism, and therefore yes, they are fit to be dissolved, or they are fit to be dismissed. So this is what we have, and then in 42nd Amendment, as we know that the government amended and said that the uh, judicial review is also kind of, there is, in while implementing DPSP, the government, while implementing DPSP, the government can pass any law, and even if it violates the fundamental rights, it is still a valid law. That is what we have discussed in the earlier chapter also. Then later on, Minerva Mill said that judicial review is part of basic structure of the constitution, and therefore no law in this country can take away the power of judicial review from the government. So this ends this chapter. We'll be discussing the next chapter, which is the parliamentary system. Now, chapter looks very easy, and many people don't even read it. But that is where they do the mistake, because last year 2 to 3 questions were asked from this chapter: parliamentary democracy, parliamentary system, role of cabinet, everything. So that is why it looks very easy. But UPSC has been testing the basics of the aspirants from last 2 3 years. Therefore, my job is to make sure that you don't take these chapters casually, and you should focus on keywords mentioned in this chapter. So first of all, this chapter starts with what are the important features of parliamentary system. So there are 8 or 9 features of parliamentary system, and generally UPSC asks on the features part. And what are the features? What is the feature? Because there is a very basic difference between presidential form of government and parliamentary form. So both are democratic, but aspirants tend to make mistake while selecting presidential and parliament system. So because last year a question was asked of cabinet form of government. Cabinet form of government, though cabinet is also there in the presidential system also, but the cabinet in that system does not swim and sand together. The cabinet does not have any power. They are just responsible to the president. But the cabinet form of government in reality is the parliamentary form of government, which is based on the system of cabinet, right? So important feature first is that there is difference between nominal and real executive. Just like in India and in Britain, where the nominal executive is the president of India or the queen, which in reality does not exercise any power, and in reality it is the real executive is the prime minister of that country. Second is majority party. Here also the party which is majority, they form the government, party or coalition. In present form system, it's not like that. There is hardly the strength of the party in the Congress or in the House of Representatives in no way decides whether who will form the government. Third is collective responsibility. So once a cabinet makes any decision, you can view your disagreement in the cabinet meeting, but once the cabinet decides a decision, in public you all have to agree with the decision. If you don't agree with the decision, you have the option of resigning. Fourth is political homogeneity. Fifth is double membership. Or this fourth part, political homogeneity, means that all those who are part of government belong to the same political party. Not like present system where there was few years back it happened that president was changed from one party to another, but the defense secretary remained same in US. So it cannot happen in India. Fifth is double membership. In parliamentary system, the minister is part of both the legislature and the executive. Sixth is leadership of PM. The PM is the leader of the government. Seventh is dissolution of lower house. So once you lose the majority, the house is dissolved, the government falls. Unlike in present system where even if the party of the president does not have majority in the parliament, he could still remain the president. Eighth is secrecy. They all are secret. They're working in secrecy. Now let's move to the presidential system. What are the important features of presidential system? So in presidential system, the president is both head of state and head of government. Right? In US, the head of the state is also the president and the head of the government is also the president. Second is that the president governs the cabinet with the help of or the president governs with the help of cabinet, but the cabinet in presidential form system is very less powerful compared to the cabinet in the parliamentary form of government, because these cabinet members are appointees of the president. They are solely responsible to the president, while in parliamentary system the cabinet members are responsible to the parliament of India. They are responsible to the parliament. They are not responsible to the prime minister only, right? And also there could be it could happen in present form of system where the secretary or the minister could be from outside the politics, or he could not be the member of the legislature, right? But in parliamentary system, the minister has to be part of the legislature. There could be, yeah, for 6 months you can stay, but after taking oath, within 6 months you have to become member of either the upper house or the lower house, right? So this is an important, difference between presidential and parliament form system. Both of them have cabinet, but the cabinet of presidential system does not have any power. They can be removed at any time by the president. They are appointed by the president, and they could be from outside the legislation. Next is the president cannot dissolve the lower house. This again is a very key feature. In India and other parliamentary democracies, once the government loses majority in the lower house, the president automatically dissolves the parliament. That does not happen in present system because the government is not formed from legislature, right? The president has no power to dissolve the parliament. Fifth is that doctrine of separation of power. So in presidential system, there is clear-cut demarcation of power. You have legislature, which make laws. You have president and its cabinet, executive, which implements the laws, and then you have judiciary, which decides that whether the law is legal or not. In case of India, do you think that there is separation of power? Because we have minister who is part of legislature and he is also part of executive, right? The parliament in India also has some judicial powers. So there is clear-cut separation of power in the presidential system, while there is weak separation of power in the parliamentary system. Next we'll discuss is distinction between Indian and British model. So the Indian model, India is a republic. Compare India and Britain. India is a republic, while Britain is a monarchy. Secondly, in Britain, the parliament is sovereign, which means that judiciary cannot declare any law passed by parliament as unconstitutional because of unwritten constitution. India, parliament is not sovereign. The PM in Britain, the PM should only be member of lower house. But in India's case, it's not like that. We have seen Manmohan Singh was part of the upper house. The member in Britain, the member of parliament alone can be appointed as minister. You have to be member of parliament in order to be appointed as minister. In India's case, you can be appointed as minister without being member of parliament for 6 months. Within 6 months, you have to come to either the lower house or the upper house of the parliament. In Britain, they have the concept of shadow cabinet, but in India, we don't have any concept of shadow cabinet. So this ends this chapter, which is the parliamentary system. Next, we'll deal with another chapter, which is federal system. So this again, like the parliamentary system, is an important chapter, and a question was asked last year from this chapter, which is what does India's federalism contains of? There was a question asked in last year prelims. So that is why I am taking this chapter, because of its importance. So first of all, we need to understand what do we mean by a unitary government. So unitary government is a government where all power is vested in national government, and regional government derive the authority from the national government. So even in states like England, states like France, which are not federal states, which are republic states, you have different sets of government. But the lower set of government, they do not have their original powers. They derive their power from the central government. Central government tells them, okay, we are giving you these powers, you have to exercise these powers. But it's not written in any book that they have, it's written on a constitution that, okay, certain lists are given to central, some are given to state, and some are given to the local government. It's not like that, right? Second thing is, when we talk of federal government, in federal government, the power is divided between national and regional government by the constitution itself. The constitution itself mentions that, okay, the areas of national importance, central government, you will manage it. The areas of local importance, the areas of importance which are local, you manage your state government, and the areas which are very local, the local government should manage. So all the constituents, all the three tiers of government get their power from the constitution itself. They don't exercise their power from the central government, right? So, what are the features of Indian Federation? So, Indian Federation, first of all, it's not the result of agreement among the states like the American Constitution, as you discussed. The second, states have no right to secede in India, as we have already discussed earlier. So we will deal with the federal features of the Constitution. So what are the federal features of Indian of India, of Indian Constitution. First of all, there is a dual polity, which means that we have union government which deals with matter of state and national importance, and we have state government which deals with the matter of regional and local importance, and they are both independent with each other, and they both derive their power from the Constitution of India. Second is that we have a written constitution. Third is there is division of power. There is clear-cut division of power between the state and the center. Fourth is we have supremacy of constitution. So neither central government is supreme, neither the state government is supreme. In India, it's a constitution which is supreme. So nobody can dominate one another. Fifth is rigid constitution in some sense. So all the federal features of the constitution, they can only be amended using 2/3 majority with half of the consent of the states required. Sixth is independent the judiciary. And seventh is bicameralism, which means that we have two houses. Now, where can a question could be asked in your exam? A question could be asked where they are given said that which of the following are the federal features of India's constitution. So you have to clearly remember that when you say that we have a integrated judiciary or we have a single citizenship, they are not part of federal features. So if it's given there, you don't have to mark it right. You have to only mark the 7-8 features. They can be considered as a part of federal features. Right? So if a question comes, you have to say that if there are 4 statements given, the dual polity, the written constitution, supremacy of constitution, and single citizenship, then you have to mark only the first 3 as right, 4th is wrong. Right? So the question could be asked in that context. Next we'll deal with is the unitary features of India's constitution. So when we talk of unitary feature, first is strong center. We have a strong center which is very strong compared to the states, right? Because in India, the state central government has power to dismiss the government under Article 356. The central government has all the subjects in the residuary list are part of, the central deals with them. And even in the concurrent list, if there is conflict between center and state, the center will prevail over the states. Second is that the states in India are destructible. I am teaching these things because you know what? UPSC has been focusing a lot on basics. A lot of people who are experts in polity, they get their polity questions wrong because their basic is not strong. They have read the hi-fi theories, but they are weak with the basics. So my idea in the first few lectures is to make your basics strong, right? So because they are asking a lot of questions. From last year, 30 questions of polity were asked. So if your polity is good, there is very good chance that you could clear the exam or you can clear your prelims very easily. So states in India are destructible, as we have discussed in Article 3. It's destructible. While in federal countries, generally the states are not destructible. So third feature is single constitution. So in all the federal countries, as you know that all the states have their own constitutions. In India, only J&K, because of the state Article 370, 70 has its own constitution. Rest of the states in India do not have their own constitution. We just have a single constitution. Fourthly, the constitution in India is flexible. So some features of the constitution could be amended with very much flexibility. The biggest thing which we can say is how the states could be destroyed. States could be destroyed very easily by simple amendment. So this makes it a very unfederal or non-federal feature, because generally in federal countries, first of all, the center cannot dissolve or destruct or could increase or decrease the area of state. And secondly, even if it does, the amendment process would be very tough. In India, you just require simple majority, right? Fifthly, there is no equality in state representation. So in US, each and every state in the Senate, they have two votes, right? They have only two votes in the Senate. Like whether the state is very big or the state is very small, all have two votes in the Senate. That is the federal feature. In India, each state, according to its population, has representation in the Rajya Sabha. So states like UP have 43, 44 seats, states like few states have just one seat. Therefore, the big states in India dominate the smaller states. And that again goes against the idea of federalism. Next we'll deal with emergency provision. Now, emergency provision is also not part of federal feature, because in India, through Article 356, the center can, whenever it wanted, it used to dismiss the state government. It happened when Indira Gandhi was in power. It happened. It started with Nehru dissolving the left government in 1959, but the president started with Janata Party when it came to power. It dissolved all the Congress government. Later on, when Indira Gandhi returned back, it dissolved all the state governments of Janata Party. Later on, after SR Bommai case, somehow now it's not very easy for the central government to dissolve the state government. But even in other emergencies, even in Article 352, the center can control the state assembly. Even in financial emergency, central can direct the state government. So in whenever there is emergency, any kind of emergency, central government it plays a major role or it controls the state government in a very large way. Next is single citizenship. This again is not a federal feature, because in US each and every state has their own citizenship. In India we have single citizenship. Next is integrated judiciary. Now here again, in US, the state laws are dealt by the state government and the central laws are governed by the central government. In India's case, we have single integrated judiciary. We have the High Court can try, or they can try the state laws also, they can try the central laws also. Same with the Supreme Court. India, we have like the case starts with lower court, then goes to High Court, then goes to Supreme Court, which is again an unfederal feature. Next is All India Services. So All India Services is they are appointed and selected by the central government, and then they go to the states. They are not part of the state, because the state have no authority to dismiss them. They can only be dismissed by the central government. So this is again it encroaches upon the domain of state government, and it is an unfederal feature. Next is parliamentary authority over state list. So in Article 249, it's written that Rajya Sabha can pass a resolution, and after that, the Parliament can make a law on state list also. So this again gives too much power to the central government or the Parliament. Next is appointment of governor. Now, governor, unlike in US, is the central appointee, he is the central nominee, and through him, central government controls the functioning and the working of the state government. And we have incidences where the governor have shown malified interest. Biggest example would be the state where I am sitting right now, Delhi. Central government is trying all rule books in the books which to stop our government from working. So this is again an unfederal feature. Next is veto over state bills. So some of the bills are reserved by the governor for the president, and president, as you know, has a power that it could resend the bill to the state assembly again and again, right? So this is almost a veto. And president is a central government employee, so it's a veto of the central government over some of the state bills. Next is integrated election machinery. This again is not a federal feature because in federal countries, each state have their own election commission. In India, we have one election commission, and the election commission is appointed by the central government, right? That is why we have this talks of EVM hacking, because some of the state government alleges that since the central election commission is a central body, therefore there are doubts on its impartiality. Next, we will deal with is comparison between federal and unitary government. This again is an important topic and could be asked in the exam. Federal government has the dual government, minimum at least. They have a single government, one type of government. They have written constitution, it is mandatory. In this case, there could be written, there could be unwritten. It's not guaranteed. So we have countries like France which have written constitution, and we have countries like Britain which have unwritten constitution. Here we have supremacy of constitution. Here there could be or could not be. We have countries like Japan, which are unitary, which have supremacy of constitution. We have Britain, where it is supremacy of the parliament. Next is here we have rigid constitution. And the unitary constitution is generally flexible. And lastly, here we have bicameralism, two houses. In the unitary government, we may or may not have a bicameral government. Not guaranteed. So this ends this chapter, which is federalism. Next issues, next topics we will deal in the next lecture. Thank you.